Welcome back to Dig It RC. I wanted to get you guys' opinion on something. Is this a Volvo A60H or is it the Volvo A40G? Now you can see here we got some scale figures. We got 1/16 scale Steve and we got 1/12 scale Eric. Now it looks like David and Goliath, but right in between is where we're looking at for scale. 1/14 scale would be right in between those two guys. So, you can't really find 1/14 scale figurines, but this will give you a good idea what we're looking at scale-wise. Now, this machine is sold as a 1/14 scale machine, and so that's what we're going to go off of is 1/14 scale. So now, comparing the people size here to the tire size, because we're going to be really looking at that in particular, as well as the whole dimensions of the machine to determine what we got. And then we're going to be looking at some of the scale features of the machine that stand out to determine what we're going to label it as. Now, the A60 and the A40 are very similar machines when looks goes. It's just the size difference is huge. So I did get all of the specs off of Volvo's website, and I highlighted the important ones. So we have position A, which is the full length of the machine from tip to tail. Dimension C, which is the height of the machine. So there's dimension C. And then we have dimension Z, and Z would be our width, full width of the machine. All right, so I've got that for the A40G, and I highlighted those all on the A40G side. And what's nice, these are all in millimeters, so we can go direct contrast in millimeters. And then here's the A60H, of course, a larger machine versus the A40. So now here we have the spec sheet off the website for this machine. I verified these measurements are accurate. All right, so let's just do a quick comparison of what we have. Now, to scale this up, it's 1/14 scale. So we just take these measurements and we multiply them by 14 to get our upscale 1-to-1 measurements. So we have 3,570 on our Z measurement, which is our width. So if we look at the A40G on our Z, we are at 3,403. So it is just a little bit smaller. Our A60H is 3,884. And so we're splitting the difference a little bit there, where we're sitting at on our actual, what our 1-to-1 would be, versus what the A40 is, as well as what the A60 is. So we're right almost smack in the middle between those two. All right, so now let's take a look at our height measurement. So from wheels to top of the bed, our converted measurement for 1-to-1 would be 3,850 millimeters. Now for the A40G, on that C measurement, that's at 3,599. All right, for the A60, for the C measurement, we're at 3,852. All right, so we're sitting almost exact 2 millimeters off from the A60. So we're closer to the A60 measurement on our height. And we're right in between between the A60 and A40 on our width. So now let's look at the length. And this one's where I found the biggest difference. So converted, we have 12,600 millimeters. Now on our measurements off the website, for the length, that's position A. For the A40, we have 11,263 millimeters. For the A60H, we are at 12,225. That's 12,225 millimeters. So now that one's interesting because now we are way over on even the A60. We're a lot longer than even the bigger machine. So we're definitely larger that way. We're dead on our height. Our width is right in between the two. So we could go either way and keep it really fairly scale either way on there. We could get away with being an A60H. We could even get away with being the A40G. Let's look at our tire size real quick. Now I looked up the tires. They spec out for the A60H. It's a 33.25 R29 tire. So the 33.25 R29, that comes out to 2,080 millimeters. Okay, for the A40G, it's calling out for a 29.5 R25. And that tire size diameter comes out to 1,822 millimeters. Now I upscaled these tires on here for 1-to-1, brought us to 2016. So actually a little bit closer to the A60H on the tire size, just a little bit shorter, but it's way taller than the A40G. So the specs on the machine, if I were to scale this thing out, I would put it more towards the A60 size machine. And I'll get some pictures inserted here too, so you can see the size difference between guys standing next to the tire on a full scale machine for the A60 and the A40. So we can get a good idea what we're looking at versus some real live pictures of the real machines versus the model here. Now, the thing that throws me as to I don't know which way to go, I will insert a couple of pictures here too, because there's some details on this machine that cry A40 a lot more than it does A60. One of those being the headlights right here. So that the headlight and turn signal, as you can see, are, and I'll show you in the picture too, closer to what it would be like on the A40. You can see those details right there of how the headlights are. And then also take a look at the mirrors right here. You see how the mirror is. Now there's a stark contrast between the A40 and A60 in this area. So here you can see all three lights are in a row. So instead of being triangular, they're all three in a straight line. And then the mirror, which is a little bit harder to see, is on a pillar right here. So it's not attached to the side like it is on this one. See how that's attached to the sides right there? It's actually on a post out here that is stationary that is attached to the body. So those are the two major differences. So those two details are telling me this is more like an A40G machine instead of an A60. But size-wise, I think we're closer to the A60 if we actually scale it down. Here's something to weigh in on this too. So I scaled these numbers down by dividing the full-size machine's actual scale numbers, dividing it by our models, real numbers. And so the A40G would be 1/13th scale. The A60 would be 1/15th scale on the width. So it falls right in between those two. So that one kind of is null. With the height, we're looking at 1/13th scale for the A40 and 1/14th scale for the A60. For the length, again, it's longer. So it'd be 1/12th scale on the A40 and 1/13.5, so almost 1/14th scale for the A60. And then the tires for the A60 are 1/14th scale. For the A40, it's 1/12.6. So 12.5 scale, almost 1/13th. So the dimensions work out well for, it could be a 1/13th scale A40G, or we could go with a 1/14th scale A60H. But again, don't forget, we have the design of the mirrors and the lights. Keeping it as is, it would be closer to a 1/13th scale A40G. So I want you guys' opinion. What do you think? Should we label this as A40G or go ahead and label it as the A60H? The only thing that really throws me is the lights and the mirrors. So what I'd like you guys to do, please throw a comment down there and tell me what you think. Just a simple A60H or A40G. And let's see what we should call this thing as and label it. I'm going to give you guys a quick scale note about Steve and Eric here. Now, Steve is 1/16th scale brooder figure, and this is a 1/12th scale figure. And taking their measurements and upscaling them, they are accurate to their scale. He would be about 5'10", and he's 6 foot in 1/12th scale. He's 5'10" in 1/16th scale. So he's even just a little bit shorter than the 6 foot mark in the 1/16th scale. Now, if we put those at 1/14th scale, then Steve here would be 5 foot. He's a little bit shorter man, and he's a Goliath, 7 foot at 1/14th scale. If we took those measurements. Now, both of these guys can work, and they work better for different machines. So 1/16th scale works really well. They look a little bit off on some of the larger equipment, but they can make the equipment look even larger. So you put him next up to a machine here, and I mean, he's huge, right? Whereas the 1/12th figure makes it look a little bit more, I would say, on the realistic side, especially depending on which scale we go with on this equipment. But they can both work, and for some of the things like the dozer and the loader, you know, 1/12th works a little bit better. They just look a little bit better inside the cabs. The cabs don't look as big and huge around them. But the 1/16th scale guys are easier to get in and out of, and some of the equipment only the 1/16th scale guys will fit in. He's just flat too big. But 1/12th, 1/16th work well for 1/14th scale equipment. And all three of those scales, you'll see, we blend all of those into our construction hobby. Because this machine right here, this sold as 1/14th scale, but it is definitely closer to 1/16th. You can see Montgomery inside there. And you know, you could not even a 1/14 scale guy would be a tight squeeze. His head's clear up the top of the cab in there. So these things are definitely 1/16, if not 1/18 scale equipment. But excavators come in all sorts of different sizes, so this still works really well. It gets in tight spaces, and you can tell it's just a smaller excavator. So it still works really good, and I still use it often, especially in tight spaces. But you can tell, I mean, we got jack here inside our loader, and I mean, you can tell it's a big cab. And I mean, these are big cabs in full scale as well. But you could tell, you know, maybe a 1/12 scale character would look a little bit better inside there. You know, maybe we'll fit one in here and try him out and see how he likes it. But either way, you can use either of those scales. And this could be 1/12 scale. I haven't scaled out a Komatsu machine to see the exact size, so I'm not sure how this one does in comparison to find out what scale it is. Maybe I'll do that on another video. Same with the loader here, or the dozer. I have not scaled out the dozer to exactly see what machine this is, if it's the D9 for sure or not. I'd have to check it out and see. Here's some details on here that aren't on the D9. So, you know, they're semi-scale. They're not exact scale. But that's all right. We don't need exact scale. They all look good together. They work good together. And all of them are blast. Because like the Hemet is sold as a 1/12 scale machine. And again, I would put it more at the 1/14 scale. If I can get some details on the full scale Hemet, I can do that one as well, just to see kind of where it lies. But if you work the numbers, it'll tell you. You know, and the Tamiyas, they're really good, real close accuracy to 1/14 scale. So those ones are nice and accurate. Tire sizes, bed sizes. I looked up all the details on the AROX 3348 on the full scale machine, and I mean, that machine's only just a few millimeters off from what the full scale, the bed size, the cab size, tires, everything is very well detailed on that. But you get into some of these machines that they're not real name brand, but for what they are, they're more affordable machines. And, you know, you got to have a little give and take. So that's why we'll decide what we're going to do for naming this one and labeling it, because I do want to get the Volvo sash completed, get the emblem on there, and maybe get some other decals and details. But I wanted to get your guys' opinion on it all to see what you think. So thanks for joining. Hope you enjoyed.